What is going on, Small Gains family? Welcome back to the podcast. I hope you're having a good week wherever it is that you're listening to this from today. This is going to be a new kind of episode format. I'm labeling it a bite-sized episode because that just makes sense, especially for anyone in the UK that grew up with BBC Bite-Size. Meaning I'm going to try and keep these episodes under 15 minutes, very easy to digest, and I'm going to cover everything you need to know on a specific topic. And it's normally going to be something that I could probably nerd out about for hours, but my aim is to condense everything and make it a lot more accessible and digestible, especially for those of us that struggle to concentrate on stuff for more than 2 minutes, which, let's face it, that is me and probably a lot of you as well. So today we're diving into progressive overload. It might sound like a bit of a gym buzzword, but actually it's really, really important when it comes to progressing and advancing in our strength and running. So I promise you, it's not just one of those meaningless buzzwords like, oh, you got to do progressive overload. It has a purpose. So today we're going to dive into what progressive overload is, how it works, why it's important, and how we apply it to our strength, our running, and our cardio. And before we dive in, I just want to let you know that the next intake of Fast and Ferocious is coming around fast. That was a terrible choice of words, no variety at all. But basically, in 3 weeks, I am going to be starting a new block of training for my Fast and Ferocious lot. Fast and Ferocious, for those who are new around here, it is my hybrid lift and run program that I started last year for people with a bit of gym experience and a bit of run experience that enjoy combining the two but want to make them work seamlessly together and not end up overtraining, getting injured, burning out, having really prolonged recovery. I've been running it since October and the community is awesome. The progress that people have made in such a short space of time since joining this program is phenomenal, and I'm so excited to keep rolling the training out for it. It's an ongoing training plan. You get weekly videos from me going through the purpose and the why. So if you want to get a bit more specific, level things up, have a solid structure, take all of the guesswork out of things for less than the price of a filter coffee a day, this may be perfect for you. So as always, I'll put the link in the show notes, or you can just message me the word FAST on Instagram and TikTok. And I'll probably ask you a few questions about where your training's at now, just so I can make sure it's the right fit. And if it isn't the right fit, I will absolutely always tell you what is. So do the thing, get in touch. We got 3 weeks until it starts. I am very, very excited. All right, bite-sized episode incoming on progressive overload. Let's do the thing. Welcome to Small Gains, the inclusive strength and running podcast, where we celebrate progress over perfection and chase intentional, incremental gains in our strength and running. Here we believe that small, consistent steps lead to big transformations in our training, our lifestyle, and our overall well-being. If you're new here, welcome to the most wholesome corner of the fitness industry. If you've always felt like a bit of an outcast to mainstream fitness norms, you are gonna love it here and fit in amazing. So what the bloody hell is progressive overload? Progressive overload is essentially just increasing the amount of stress that we put on our body, so our musculoskeletal system then slowly adapts to that increased stress, and as a result, it gets stronger and more powerful overall. And the way that we do this is by gradually increasing our workload over almost an indefinite amount of time. And we might do that by lifting heavier weights, completing more reps, running further distances, and then the bigger picture of that is that it all adds up to big advancements in strength, muscle growth, and endurance. And that's the thing that keeps us making progress. Now, the reason that using progressive overload in our training matters so much, because without it, we will just stop improving. It would almost be like repeating the first year of school over and over again. And when you don't use progressive overload within your workouts, the best example of this is you end up with a person that trains that does 3 sets of 10 on the same exercise at the same weight, week in, week out, or they're a person that runs 5K a week at the same speed every single week. If you do the same thing week on week without making any tweaks to create more stress on your body, and when I say stress, I mean good stress, not like chronic anxiety-inducing stress. If you always do the same thing, your body's just going to get used to that intensity. It's going to get used to that volume, so it stays exactly where it is. So if we want that different result, if we want to get stronger, we want to build more endurance, we want to run faster and further, we need to progressively overload what we do in our training gradually every week. If you're a person that has someone doing your programming, if a coach is thorough and knows their shit, They will guide you through this stuff every week in your workout programming, and they will ensure that you are using progressive overload in your workout, whilst also getting your feedback on like your recovery and your energy levels. Because some weeks we might need more rest, which sometimes you might hear referred to as like a deload. And this is why my one-to-one lot get their programs updated every single week, because I read their workout comments, I look at their form checks, I listen to their feedback. And then based on all of that information, plus the numbers that I can see them hitting in the workout app, I can then suggest things like weights, reps, intensities, distances and time based on what happened the week before. Progressive overload is literally just chasing the small gains every single week, which is the basis for this podcast. So it's probably a good one for me to cover this early on, to be fair. So how does progressive overload work? The basic principle is our body gets put under more stress, and then our body then responds to that by adapting. So we build more strength, we build more muscle mass, we build more endurance, we build more cardio capacity. And this is why not all stress that we talk about is inherently bad. It makes us stronger and it makes us more resilient. And that's actually true outside of the gym as well. If you have never gone through a stressful thing in your life, the first stressful thing that happens will be absolutely horrendous and feel like the end of the world. But when you've gone through a lot of stressful things, you come out more resilient every time and you deal with it that little bit better every time. So managing stress outside of the gym is almost like the progressive overload of life, maybe. Maybe it isn't, I don't know. So if we take a beginner in the gym, they're going to find the weight that they start with really hard. And what happens over time is they don't necessarily find it any easier because we make it harder using progressive overload. If someone just goblet squatted 4 kilograms for the rest of their life, then they're going to find it really easy. Their muscles aren't going to grow. Their body's not going to have more stress on it. They're not going to progress in strength beyond being able to goblet squat 4 kilograms really, really efficiently. But if we then take that to 10 kilograms, to 20 kilograms, to 30 kilograms, it's always going to feel hard, but their body is going to get stronger with every little increase that we chase along the way. There's so many different ways to progressively overload within our training, and we're going to talk about that in relation to strength and running. So the first way is to increase the weight and the resistance of an exercise. The second way is to increase the sets and the reps, so the overall volume of an exercise is higher. The next way would be to reduce the rest time if you're doing something in sections or sets, because having less recovery time in between doing things means that you have to operate at a higher intensity, and that puts more stress on the body because you have less time to recover. We can play with the speed in which we do something. We can slow it down, we can speed it up, and depending on what the movement is, that will make it harder or easier. Now, before we go any further, your main important reminder and takeaway from this is going to be that small gradual changes are going to be the thing that prevents overtraining, overuse injuries, and just exhausting your central nervous system to the point where you are completely burnt out and your recovery time is super, super long and you're not able to necessarily train as much as you might want to. So small gains mentality here all the way. Okay, let's get into strength training first. So a basic example of progressive overload in strength training would be if in week 1 of a workout program, you could squat 30 kilograms for 8 reps. Between week 2 to 4, you might look to increase those reps. So you might look to work within an 8 to 12 rep range. And then by week 5, if you've managed to get 12 reps at 30 kilograms, you might then decrease the reps, but then increase the weight. So it might then be 35 kilograms or 40 kilograms. And then you're going to rinse and repeat. What we're using to progressively overload our squat in that example is we're adding extra reps, and then we're eventually adding extra load. And this is probably the most common form of progressive overload with strength training: more reps and more weight. Other progression methods would be tempo. So when you slow the tempo of a lift down, for example, let's use the squat again. If you increase the time that it takes to lower into the squat, if you add a pause at the bottom, that is going to create a lot more tension on your muscles because you're doing that thing for longer. That's what we refer to as time under tension. So increasing the time under tension is a form of progressive overload. The next one, as I mentioned before, would be having less time in between sets. So if, for example, you're resting 2 minutes in between sets for a few weeks, then you might bump that down to just 90 seconds. Again, less recovery time, more stress on the body. And then the last one would actually be using your own effort level as an intensity. So using RPE, which is rate of perceived exertion, or RIR, which is reps in reserve, to push closer to failure. I will do a completely separate podcast on intensity, reps in reserve, RPE, because it's a whole other topic and I don't want to overload the bite-sized episode with too much information. So my main tips to sum up for applying progressive overload in your strength training is, firstly, just leave your lifting ego at the door. Good form, full range of motion, and controlling the weight to whatever tempo is prescribed are all super important here. Nail that for each weight before moving on. As we work closer to failure in our lifts, our form will break down as we get closer to muscle failure, but definitely try and maintain it till the end as best as you can. So essentially here, just use your common sense. Don't do shit reps just to lift a bit heavier and get the numbers up. There's not a lot to gain from that unless you're just on an ego trip. And even then, I would argue there still isn't. And final tip, which isn't really a tip, it's okay if you can't add extra reps or extra weight every week. Using myself as an example, when I did my squats on Monday, it was the second day of my menstrual cycle and I just felt completely depleted. I didn't feel tired or exhausted to not train, but I went in and I didn't manage to add an extra set of 3 to my squat on Monday like my coach had programmed, but that's okay. It will probably happen next week. Progress isn't ever going to be linear with this stuff. So although we're chasing it every week, it doesn't always mean it's going to happen. Don't beat yourself up about it. As we said in last week's episode, it's not that deep. Don't be a dick to yourself. It's all good. So that's strength training covered. Now let's talk about applying progressive overload in running and our cardio work. So there's a big misconception with cardio and progressing each week that it's just about moving faster, doing everything as fast as possible and getting as many rounds in as possible. And yes, that is one form of progressive overload within cardio, but moving slower can still be a form of overload if your weekly volume is increasing, if the time you're doing something for is increasing. And that's why I bang on about steady state, easy runs, long conditioning pieces where we don't work as intensely, but we do it for longer. So we build up the endurance, we build up the engine. Having a variety of high intensity and low intensity is super important. So it's not just about going fast all the time. So with applying progressive overload to our running and our cardio, the same premise applies. We're going to chase little progressive increments, small gains every week. And it's going to depend a lot on what the goal is. Are you trying to work up to doing something for a very long time, or are you trying to work up to doing something for a short time but faster? So without going down an absolute rabbit hole into that, I just want to give you a few easy examples of progressive overload in running. So the first and most obvious two are going to be to increase the distance or the time that you run for, but gradually. You don't necessarily want to add more than 5 to 10% a week to your total time or distance. If you take jumps in increased volume too high, again, recovery is not going to feel good. You're more at risk of any niggles or overuse injuries. We want to be clever about it. The next one would be running at a faster pace or improving your time for like a set distance. So that might be like improving your 5K run time or improving your 2,000 meter row time. You've got a distance that you've set a benchmark for, and then you chase doing the thing faster and more efficiently. Another one when it comes to running would be the environment that you do it in. So doing it in a hotter climate, doing it in a colder climate, doing it at altitude, or the most obvious one would be increasing an incline. If you run outside doing a run route that has more hills, that's going to be a form of progressive overload because you're going to have to work a lot harder to deal with those hills. And then lastly, if you are doing any interval work, any tempo runs, then again, reducing rest time in those intervals is a form of progressive overload. So outside of running, if we think of things like conditioning pieces, flow pieces, high rock style workouts, the more functional fitness where we might do AMRAPs or do something for a certain amount of rounds and your time is your score or the amount of rounds is your score. The way that we can progressively overload those would be adding on an extra round, doing that piece of cardio for longer. If you're using weights for a piece of work, actually increasing the amount of weight that you use. And then lastly, similar to running, decreasing rest times if you are taking rests at any point within the workouts. And then just working faster at a higher intensity, trying to push yourself and give more. The main hot tip I've got for you off the back of this is just really avoid drastic increases in distance and time. You can see the pattern here, especially if you are a runner, because running is really impactful on our body. It's very explosive. We are plowing our body into the ground, like 6 times our body weight is going through each leg as it hits the floor. And if you increase your workload, your volume, your distance, your time drastically, you're then going to start to end up with like shin splints, knee pain, hip niggles, anything like that. And this is often what happens when people get really, really into running. I've done it myself. You love it. You want to do it all the time. You do too much too soon. And then all of a sudden you have one of these little overuse injuries and all you can do is rest and strengthen it. So no dramatic increases, please. Small gains only. So that's our bite-sized episode on progressive overload. I hope you feel like you've got a much better understanding of it now, how it works, how you can implement it in your own training. The key takeaways: progressive overload itself is the foundation of building up our strength and endurance. So if you aren't considering making those small progressions every week, you're going to stay exactly where you are. Sometimes staying where you are, if you want to maintain something, is absolutely fine. If you want to maintain a level of strength, not necessarily improve it, it might be that that is actually a goal. But if you're a person that wants to increase your strength, your running and your endurance, then progressive overload needs to happen. So to consistently make it happen and to consistently improve, we need a plan. Now, I bang on about having a plan all the time. And the reason I do is just because without one, it's going to be a lot harder to actually make tangible progress and know that you're on the right path. Having a plan lays out the progression. If you have the means to have a coach that does this for you, there's going to be a lot less guesswork for you. And that's the perk of working one-to-one with someone, paying for a program or a group program. The person designing the workouts, like I said earlier, if they're thorough, they will ensure that progressive overload is a factor throughout every training block. And then all you need to do is show up and do the work. So if you find going to the gym and smashing out a training plan pretty effortless, but actually thinking about what you're doing, why, and how to overload that is hard, your answer is going to be to get a plan, get some structure, whether that's a coach, a program, or an app, it doesn't matter. Just have the plan. Final advice before I leave you: track your progress. Weights, reps, distances, times. It's not excessive to track metrics to keep an eye on where your fitness level is at. It's only excessive if you start having emotional reactions to your results and putting your self-worth onto them. Everyone that I work with obviously tracks their workouts in an app so I can then see their progress. But if you don't necessarily work with me, there's some great apps that you can track your lifts and your running in. Next bit of final advice: be patient. Nothing happens overnight. All those small changes are going to add up. So small gains mentality all the way. And then finally, have a plan and adapt your plan based on how your sessions go, with or without a coach. Be willing to listen to yourself and how you feel after your sessions. Actually think about your energy levels. When you leave the gym, almost have a bit of a mental debrief. How did that go? Was I happy with that? When you go into the gym, check in with yourself. How am I feeling today? Am I super tired? Keep an eye on things. The more you can kind of hone in on how your body is feeling, the more you can understand what training load you can manage week on week, and it's always really helpful. So let's leave it there for today. Fast and Ferocious, new block, starting in 3 weeks. Drop me a DM or use the form in the show notes if you'd like to apply. Do all the podcasty stuff, subscribe, rate and comment. It helps me out so much, and I know that you know that. And obviously, keep chasing those small gains. Bye.